is Focus with Jack Caudill.
Good evening, I'm Jack Caudill. Welcome to this month's edition of Focus. This month we're talking about challenges facing public education here in South Dakota. Three guests with us to talk about that. Dr. Lori Simon, she is the superintendent of Rapid City area schools. Katie Albers, she's the superintendent of New Underwood Schools, and Charles Cuny Jr., the superintendent of Littlewood Schools. Now, the South Dakota Department of Education lists an average daily enrollment for the 2017-2018 school year here in the state at just under 133,000 students. That is up from 119,000 back in the 2008-2009 year. Those stats also say there were 9,529 educators working in classrooms across South Dakota. Dr. Simon, we're going to start with you. Are we doing a good job of educating our kids these days?
I think we're doing a great job of educating our kids these days. I know here in Rapid City, we have been working really hard the last 3 years to improve educational outcomes for our students, and we're excited about some of the results that we're beginning to see.
Katie, as you look at it, are we doing a good job with our kids these days?
I would agree that we are as well. I think that education as a career is a good place to be, and I think that we're doing a really good job with our kids.
Charles, how about you? Do you feel good about where education is these days?
I do. I feel good about where it's at, but I also recognize that in our particular district, I think we've had a number of teachers that have retired, will retire, and I think the thing that I worry about, or I think that the challenge is, what is it going to look like in 5 or 10 or 15 years on the reservation? Are we going to be able to, have the funding to attract teachers to pull them out of the public system in South Dakota? And just have those types of partnerships. So those are probably the bigger challenges I see. But I definitely appreciate the dedicated teachers in our schools who've dedicated their life to teaching.
Now, when people think about challenges in education, usually finances comes up. One of the first things is money. That includes everything from paying teachers, keeping older buildings up to date, making sure they're safe. How big are the financial challenges that you face on the reservation with Littlewood Schools?
Well, I think it's the biggest challenge right now for us is our facilities. We are, 100% dependent on federal funding. So for the last 30 years, our operation and maintenance funding has been funded at about 50 cents on the dollar. The dilapidation of school facilities across BIE-funded schools across the United States is well documented in a number of GAO reports. And so for our challenge as Littlewood School is to really have that conversation with our representatives. Senator Thune, Rounds, Johnson have been very helpful. Governor Nome has been very helpful in terms of this specific issue for BIA tribal grant schools in South Dakota. So it really comes down to the appropriations, what the Green Book says in the next 2 years, whether our schools are on that list, and we just have a number of different strategies to really have that political debate with our representatives and with the Bureau of Indian Affairs as it relates to facilities. And that's probably a whole different conversation than what the public schools in South Dakota face. I wished we could take out a bond. I look forward to what Rapid City is doing with the expansion and repair of their facilities. But our challenge, we're just playing it with a different set of rules. And so that's the challenge we face.
Now, when you talk about facilities, how dire are some of the needs that you need to get done?
It's huge. I mean, our facility comprises 3 different facilities, one that was built in the 1930s, one that was built in the 60s, and another one that was built in the 1980s. Our cafeteria was designed to service 250 students. Right now with students and staff, we probably serve 3 meals a day because we have a lunch, dinner program. So we can serve, 900, 1,800, a couple thousand people in our cafeteria that was designed to service 200 students. So that's just one element. I mean, if you looked at our safety backlogs and deficiencies, they're well documented. It's just a matter of getting the funding there for them.
Now, Katie, looking at the new Underwood district, how much of your effort is spent into the money and the dollars and cents in making all of this work and getting done what you need to get done?
Well, it's definitely a delicate balance that we try to make. You know, our business manager is really good about keeping an eye on those certain things, but in a small district with a small tax base, it's definitely a challenge to balance all of those things together.
How critical are some of the needs that you have there that you're trying to get done and trying to get addressed?
You know, our buildings similarly are older. Our building was built in 1929, the main part of it, and we've had additions various years through. So there's a lot of needs that we have, but we do a really good job of maintaining the buildings and the facilities that we do have.
Dr. Simon, obviously the facilities questions that you guys are going after right now are well documented with the bond issue coming out. How tough are the finances of a district the size of Rapid City these days?
Yes, well, you know, school financing is very complex, and although I think the state of South Dakota has inched up in the state rankings a bit as a result of the new teacher formula a few years ago, and that was just prior to the start of my tenure, and we are very appreciative of that. There's still a lot of work to be done here in South Dakota around school financing. We know that, you know, we've got 900 plus amazing teachers, but we also have 1,000 other staff that we also have to attend to and fairly compensate for all of the hard work that they all do. But then trying to balance too the competing demands that are on a very limited capital outlay funding source. I mean, that helps us with deferred maintenance. We have issued certificates in the past to build new schools out of that funding, but it's also intended to be the primary funding source for curriculum dollars, technology adoptions, new buses, all of which have huge price tags. And so lots of competing realities on that small funding source. So that really kind of leads to where we're at with our facilities needs. The Rapid City area schools have not gone out to the community for a large-scale bond effort since the 1950s. And so it really is a very, very long time in coming, and that's kind of why the needs are all converging at once. It's been decades and decades since large-scale improvements have been made across the district, and that's really what is driving our need right now.
Now, the bond issue goes to a vote. Obviously, that can be a tough sell. For the public, that's a lot of money. How do you go out and sell that to them that this is something that we need to do?
Yes. Well, you know, that work has really already begun. I've probably given about 22 different community presentations thus far, but I think it's going to have to be hundreds. I also think that we need to begin getting the public at large into our facilities so that they can really see and understand firsthand some of these deterioration needs that my colleague here just talked about in his district that we are encountering within our school system. We know it's going to be an uphill battle. South Dakota is one of only a handful of states that requires a supermajority, and so even that extra, you know, bar of a supermajority versus a simple majority makes a big difference. We have our work cut out for us, but we are really hoping to engage pretty broadly with the community to help them understand the need and hopefully work our way towards a positive outcome. And we really see that as benefiting not only our schools and our students, but certainly our entire community.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll continue our look at public education here in South Dakota when we come back with this month's edition of Focus. And welcome back to this month's edition of Focus. I'm Jack Caudill. We're talking about the challenges facing public education here in South Dakota. Katie Albers is the superintendent of New Underwood Schools. As you've seen it, have students changed over the years? Have parents changed over the years? How big of a challenge is it to get that parental involvement?
You know, I think that, I don't think that kids have changed. I do think that parenting has changed. The structure of the home has changed in the last 30 years. You have a lot of parents that are working, you have a lot of single parents, and it's a matter of supervision, I think, with kids, and that falls both on parents and schools, both. Challenges that we're a small community, we're a small school. I feel like, and having worked in larger school districts, I think that we have a better opportunity at times to get to some of those parents. Parents come in quite often, we can sit down and talk with them, teachers have a good rapport, but I think that definitely the change has been with parenting and not and students as well, but more so with parenting and the family structure.
Now, Charles Cuny Jr. is the superintendent of Little Wound Schools. As you look at it, the evolution of students and parents, how does that work? How big of a challenge is it for you guys to get parental involvement with the kids?
I think that's a constant challenge. I think there's different strides that you make. I definitely think the dynamic of communication with your parents has changed. I also think the evolution of technology and how kids interact with one another is a challenge for an array of educators, depending on where they're at and how they use technology. So I think there's some real challenges there in that element. I also think that across the breakdown of the nuclear family, extended family, single homes, parents living with grandparents, just the different effects of poverty have a huge effect on the child. And I think those are real challenges in education, is because that as that evolves, we really need to have strategies to reach those individual children. And I think all of those elements play a huge role in our ability to educate our students.
And Dr. Lori Simons, superintendent of Rapid City area schools. How do you guys go about trying to get that parental involvement? And has that changed that you've seen in your years in education?
I have seen it changed, and I would agree with Katie that it is a lot to do with how parenting has changed. I do see a number of families where parents are juggling more than one job, a lot of single parent households where, parents are counting on older siblings to help in the transition from work to home. And so parents are incredibly busy. And so I think we have to be more creative in how we work and partner with our families. I think sometimes there's this thought that parents don't care about their students the way that perhaps they used to, or what they experienced previously in their tenure. But I have yet to meet a parent that doesn't care, or a family that doesn't care deeply about their child. They're just very busy trying to take care of basic necessities in life. And so we have to use creative ways, maybe family events where they're coming in to see their kids doing something, to engage them in other ways and take advantage of ways to really highlight what kids are doing as a draw to get more parents in, because that's what really brings our families to school, is something that their kids are doing. But I do see a change in students over time too, and I think because of technology and what I would call probably an addiction to technology and social media, I see anxiety in kids in unprecedented levels. And I think if you look at some of the latest research, 70% of adolescents report that depression and anxiety is real, and they see it as a real problem among themselves and their peers. I think that's pretty alarming and something that we as adults need to pay attention to.
What's the school's role in maintaining the mental health of the students?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as a school system, we're taking a multifaceted approach. And we can't do it on our own, so we are having to partner with our community as well. We do need more resources, though. We need to have more counselors in our schools. We'd like to bring that ratio down. We'd like to bring more social workers in, but we've been trying to be creative in finding ways to bring more social workers and counselors in. But we also have some amazing partners. We've been working with BMS very closely. We started a pilot 2 years ago, we expanded last year, and now we're expanding up so that all of our high schools now will also have a BMS mental health counselor in our schools. So really taking a multifaceted approach. In addition to that, we're also doing some pretty deep suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention work, and have just passed some new policy work and put in place some new protocols and responses so that we can intervene more quickly in these very significant crisis situations.
Katie, where do you see the school's role in the overall well-being of the students?
I think that role is definitely increasing as time goes on, and with technology and those types of things that students have readily access to. One of the issues that is always brought to the forefront is bullying. When we were kids, a bully might happen at, you might encounter a bully at school, but now, thanks to technology, it's not just stopping at school, it goes on beyond those walls. So the school definitely has a responsibility to step in those instances, but we also need to have that partnership with parents and community so that it's not just the school watching for those things. Because it does take a village, that old adage that says it takes a village to raise a child is definitely true. For our schools, we're a little bit smaller scale. We do also partner with BMS, and they come into our schools as well, and we do what we can. Our teacher to student ratio is a little bit lower, so we have an opportunity to get to know our kids really well. And so I feel like that's one of the upticks of a small school district, is that we know our kids and we can do, I don't want to say a better job, but a significantly, I don't know what the word is, but a good job of identifying kids that are struggling.
Charles, down at Littlewood, what do you do to ensure the mental health of the students is taken care of?
Well, I think our school has had, in our community, in our reservation, and our tribe has had, a number of suicide epidemics that have affected our community, our individual families. And one thing that the school has been able to do is, number one, we've really transitioned to becoming a trauma-informed school. So we're in the first year of a 5-year SAMHSA grant that really puts the resources, additional counseling in place. And what that does is it kind of looks at the lens of school discipline, the individual students from a different lens. It provides the professional development to our staff to be able to look at the student from a different perspective, give them different coping skills to deal with behaviors, gives them tools to direct them in the right direction to find the right mental health care that they may need. But that's something that we all have to buy into as a school, as a school board, and as a tribe. And those are things that I think Littlewood School has really taken on. We have a really good team, but it's a continuing challenge. And I also think on the reservation, the schools serve as kind of it's the safe haven for the students. And if we can provide a certain level of counseling, we may be able to give them that third-party mental health care they may need from Indian Health Service. There's definitely a relationship with Child Protective Service, public safety, and the court system. And those are all continuing challenges of sharing information, networking, and resources. But we're definitely at that point where I really think we're going to take additional strides here in the next few years.
All right, we got to take another break. We'll continue our look at public education in South Dakota when we come back with this month's edition of Focus. I'm Jack Caudill. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus, talking about the challenges facing public education here in South Dakota. Charles Cuny Jr. is the superintendent of Littlewood Schools, where there have been no shortage of school shootings around the country. Thankfully, nothing that serious here. But what are you doing to ensure physical safety, and how big of a challenge is that?
It's probably the biggest challenge that I think anyone faces as a school administrator. You're entrusted with the safety of a group of students, and so for us, I think there's a continuous reevaluation of our safety plan, and that requires evolving with technology, with time. We've partnered with the Rapid City Police Department in terms of ALICE training, incorporated that in one level or another. Partnerships with first responders on the reservation, but there's always a continuous reevaluation of what the plan is, what the threat is. The school has increased its utilization of technologies, cameras. I think there's probably going to be an expanded look at the individual child. I know it's a little far-fetched, but I really wish there was some level of identification that we could hold on to a student K through 12, whether it was a wristband, just something that we could account for. They're on the bus, they're in the lunchroom, they're in the gym, they're in the classroom. We know they're at home. I know that brings up some debatable issues, but in terms of just assuring the individual safety of the student, it's a huge issue, and it's a continuous battle, and it's top priority.
Katie Albers, superintendent of New Underwood Schools. How much do you worry about that in a small town like New Underwood, 230 some students?
You know, you always think it's never going to happen in a small town, but that's one of my top priorities. Maintaining the safety of my kids, and I refer to all of my students, not just my own, is priority for me. And we've started to do some more training. You know, years back when we did the lockdowns and those types of things, I always, as a teacher, as an educator in a classroom, always felt really awkward by those. So I was really glad to have Alice training come into our school district, and we've been working with community events to teach parents what we do. We've trained staff and all of those areas. So safety is huge for me. That's just a really big top priority for me.
Now, Dr. Lori Simon, Superintendent of Rapid City Area Schools, over 13,000 students. Obviously a little bit different there. What are you guys doing to make sure students are safe here?
Well, we're doing a number of things, and I, like my colleagues, believe that it's probably a superintendent's worst fear, and no longer can any of us possibly think this couldn't happen to us. I think all of us are always trying to think proactively and having really good safety plans and training in the hands of our students and our staff so that we've got the latest technology, students and staff know what to do. I think Alice training has been very effective for us. It's something that our students and families and staff alike have all really bought into, and I think they feel like, you know, in a worst case scenario, they are better prepared than they were previously under previous training models. And so that's certainly a plus. But we're really fortunate to have both Pennington County and Rapid City PD right in our neighborhood, and providing liaison officers in our schools and in our resource officers. And so that's a great partnership, and we work really closely with them to identify students at risk or any kind of safety situations and work very quickly to mediate anything that might be of concern. Certainly though, as we have gone out to our community regarding our bond effort, we are hearing in very large percentages that safety and security is paramount concern in the eyes of our families and of our community. And so to that end, as we think forward, any of our new facilities, any renovations are going to need to have safety and security in mind.
All right, got about 30 seconds apiece left. How are you doing as far as recruiting and retaining teachers?
It's a bit of an uphill battle right now. We're struggling with special ed, science, and math, but moving forward, trying to fill those positions.
How about in a smaller district? Is it easy to bring teachers in and keep them?
Sometimes it is, depending on if they have community ties. But we struggle a little bit in some of those same areas with Dr. Simon as well. But we do the best we can to keep the ones we've got. So.
How about down in the reservation schools? How tough is it to bring teachers in down there and keep them around?
On a good year, it's maybe 15%. In a bad year, it could be 35%. I'd say this past year, it's been about 30%, but our HR department has done a good job of filling most of them at this point. So I think we're in good position going into the fall.
Is that going to get better or worse as we go over time, do you think?
I think it's going to be a huge challenge. I mean, we got to come up with creative ways, whether it's sharing, you know, the algebra teacher, the science teacher with other districts, coming up with creative ways to get those highly qualified teachers into the rural parts of South Dakota. In the reservation faces those same challenges. I would say a large percentage of our SPED services are contracted through companies out of Rapid City, and that same model may go into effect with some of our STEM classes as we move into the future, and the utilization of technology. So I don't think it's getting better, and I don't think there's a huge number of people going into teaching programs.
I got to cut you off. We are out of time. Dr. Lori Simon, Katie Albers, Charles Cuny Jr. I want to thank you guys all for joining us. I want to thank you for watching, and hope to see you again the first Sunday night of next month for the next edition of Focus. Good night.